Okay, here's the gist, Zane. We've got, yesterday was pretty intense. It was crazy. So they were digging the tunnel and they heard on the other side of the tunnel some noises and they realized that it was actually her dad and Dominic, who had started from the west side, and their tunnels actually linked back up to where Gerda and Felix had been digging. And so they have been digging and digging, but the tunnel is about to collapse. Let's see. The tunnel is about to collapse. They have only 24 hours to get through because it turns out they asked Anna to be a spy, and Anna said she would tell on them if they didn't get through within 24 hours. And then Felix would also have to report for military duty. And then Felix didn't report for military duty, and so the Grenzers showed up at their house.
Felix!
Yeah, right?
Fritz.
Oh, Fritz. Why am I? Oh, because you read the book about Felix. Fritz! Oh my gosh, you guys. Fritz didn't report for military duty. And so they came to their house. They had to escape. And how they did that is they bribed Victor, one of the Grenzers, with their car. They left the keys for their car and he took the bait and let them go. And so they ran to the tunnel. They're about to finish the last part of the tunnel and hope that it doesn't collapse. Anna's family showed up and they're going to go through the tunnel, and Officer Mueller and his wife and baby are also going to go through. So, did I miss any parts, you guys?
You got perfect.
Got it? Okay.
I don't think you missed any.
Sweet. All right. So we have chapter 46 and 47 today, and then we are done. Okay. Chapter 46. Once we were close enough to see him, Fritz motioned that the gap was open and to hurry. Women and children were to go through first, which was fine by me, but Anna didn't seem to be adjusting as well to the closed-in tunnel. I took her clammy hand and half dragged her to the very end, then whispered that everything would be all right, even if I wasn't convinced of that yet. Frau Mueller was there too, and Fritz told her to lie on her stomach and crawl through the low opening. She thrust her baby into my arms while she went through. I hadn't expected that and took her child somewhat clumsily. The baby reacted to the awkward change of position and began fussing in my arms. I bounced him and tried to coo at him, but he must have sensed my own anxiety and started crying louder. "Stop him," Fritz hissed. But I didn't know how. I was certain that somehow this baby could sense the panic inside me, and so everything I tried only made him more upset. Then, without even asking, Anna took the baby from me and cradled him in her arms, as comfortably as his own mother had. He instantly quieted down until Frau Mueller said he was through, and then Anna crouched down to pass the baby through the opening into her hands. Anna had saved the moment, but, just as important, the baby had forced her to gather her own courage enough to go through the gap, an opening so small that it didn't look like it should be able to accommodate her body, much less any of the rest of us. Fritz told Mama to go next, and Anna's mother would be next after that. I got in place for my turn and watched my mother easily slide through the gap. I heard her brief reunion with my father and could only imagine what it must have taken for her to push away from him as he begged her to keep running to the end. Anna's mother went next, but she was too close to one edge and got stuck. She panicked and began squirming and kicking, trying to roll over to her back. In the process, she kicked out and her foot struck the wall of dirt. Instantly, a large chunk crashed down on her upper legs. She gave a cry, although I didn't think she was seriously hurt. "Give me your hands," my father said. Just like that, Anna's mother was pulled through. "I don't like this," Fritz said, feeling the wall above the collapsed chunk. "This whole thing is going to come down. Hurry, Gerda, it's your turn now." I went down to my stomach and put my cheek against the cold ground. With my hands in front of me, I clawed at the dirt, wiggled forward like a worm or a snake. Dirt crumbled down into my back, more of it than I liked. Fritz was right. This wall was going to come down, and maybe the rest of the tunnel with it. Papa grabbed my hands when I was halfway through and yanked me forward just as he had done for Anna's mother. Once on the other side, I was immediately caught in my father's tear-stained embrace. Even through the dirt and sweat, he smelled to me just as he had when I was young. Over the last 4 years, I had tried so many times to recreate in my mind that combination of strong cheese and stronger coffee, just to hold on to his memory. But now, everything about him rushed back at me, as if we had never been separated at all. It was too dark to see much of his face, but I did see a tender smile and the whites of his eyes when he said, "Run, Gerda, go." But I wouldn't leave without Fritz, not after everything he and I had been through together. Anna's father came through next and needed no urging to run past us toward his family. Then a voice from far on the eastern end shouted, "Whoever is in this tunnel, you are ordered to stop." I didn't need to see them. I already knew that Grenzers were here. Shots fired into the tunnel, their echo so loud that even from this end it rang in my ears. Officer Mueller came through after that, and when his eyes met mine, I wanted to hurt him. Why had he come through next? Where was Fritz? I nearly screamed with terror. I fell to my knees and to slide back to the other side of the gap. If he was injured, I could still drag him through. And if he was worse than injured, I couldn't even think about that. Papa grabbed my arms and pulled me back to my feet. I started to protest, but he wrapped his arms around me, put a hand over my mouth, and hushed me. "They know Fritz is there," he whispered. "They don't have to know you're here too." He tried to make me run again, but I wormed free and went back to my knees. Where was Fritz? Then I saw his head poke through. He was alive, but wasn't wiggling through as quickly as he should have. Working together, Papa and Officer Mueller pulled him through. "I'm shot," he said through clenched teeth. "A bullet got my leg." Papa helped him to his feet, then motioned for me to come over. "Get him out of this tunnel," Papa said. "Bear up his weight." "I will." I wasn't sure how, but I would get him out. Fritz wrapped one arm around me and used the other to brace himself through the tunnel. He couldn't use his injured leg at all, and whenever we moved too fast or it bumped against a rock, he grunted with pain and clutched my shoulder so tight that we both nearly collapsed. Still, we kept going forward. I had the strength to support him, but not the height. And he had to lean over too far. Papa would have done better. Where was he? What about Mueller? What were they waiting for? After several meters, more gunfire echoed in the tunnel. With a strange cracking sound, the bridge between our two tunnels collapsed. That's what Papa was doing then. Shots still rang, but they wouldn't pass through the dirt. The Grenzers were trapped behind us, but a lot of tunnel remained ahead. In the dim light, I could see where Papa had put in supports to hold up the dirt roof, but they weren't as strong as Fritz's bricks, and dirt rained down on us, some of it in large chunks that signaled a bigger collapse was coming. Suddenly, several meters ahead, shovels pounded in the ground. Their crunch and plunking sounds were all too familiar to me now. But we'd left officers in the tunnel, but more of them Maybe we'd left officers behind in the tunnel, but more of them were in the death strip directly above us. The layers of dirt on the surface weren't nearly thick enough to hold them out for long. I wondered where the outer wall was when we would pass beneath it. Wherever it was, I knew we hadn't crossed it yet, not with the length of a tunnel still remaining. "Ah!" Fritz's leg bumped into some protruding rock, and his hand pinched my shoulder so tight that I wanted to cry out too. "I'm sorry," I mumbled. I'm slowing you down. Fritz leaned heavier on me and swayed as if he was dizzy. Leave me here. That's the dumbest idea you've ever had, I told him. Stay with me, Fritz. You're going to make it. Then Papa and Officer Mueller ran up behind us. Papa picked up Fritz in his arms, drawing strength I never imagined he had to run with a body nearly as large as his own. And Mueller grabbed my hand to pull me along with him. I yanked it free and dug my feet into the ground. Maybe he was on our side, but just barely. My father had taken all the risks to get us this far, while he had stayed in the safe zone just in case things turned bad. I didn't want his help now, and certainly didn't need it. But Mueller didn't seem to care. He grabbed my arm again, and this time his grip had no forgiveness. I would run at his side or get dragged behind him. Papa and Fritz weren't far ahead of us, but they rounded a short bend out of our sight, and I held my breath. Mueller probably didn't think of himself as a Grenzer anymore, but I still did. Then right above our heads, one of the holes being dug crashed through from the surface. Dirt cascaded over us, and a large rock fell at my feet, momentarily forcing Mueller and me back. I looked up, expecting to see starlight, but saw only shadows of several Grenzers standing over the hole. There were foul curses and orders being shouted to widen the hole, but Mueller steered me around the rock so we could keep running. Then a hand reached down into the tunnel with a gun at the end of it. It aimed directly at me, so even in this dim light, I thought I could see directly down the barrel. I froze, as if every part of me had just turned to ice. All that remained was for someone to order him to fire. Chapter 47. This is it. Mueller gave me a hard shove, forcing me toward the bend, then turned back and reached for the gun, evidently hoping to grab it before any damage was done. I rounded the bend in time to hear the echo of gunshots inside the tunnel and a body's collapse onto the ground. I wanted to keep running. I couldn't be more than a minute away from safety, but I also couldn't ignore that Mueller had just saved my life. Putting himself between the gun and me, I had to help him. I crept back to the bend. The hand with the gun was gone, but shovels were digging back into the dirt, widening the hole. Mueller was on the ground directly below them. There was enough moonlight now that I could see the blood on his chest. Only a few nights ago, I had grabbed a heavy door and dragged it beneath the eyes of the watchtower. This wasn't much different. The same eyes were above me now, and I had escaped their guns once before. I pried my arms beneath Mueller's shoulders and locked my hands together across his chest. I felt his blood there, warm and sticky, and it took all my courage to stay with him. Then I heaved a deep breath and dragged him so slowly I wasn't sure if I was moving at all. Dirt rained down over us as the gap widened. It wouldn't be much longer before it was wide enough for an entire body to fit through, or before they weakened the roof and collapsed the tunnel. I wasn't sure which would be worse. Mueller mumbled something to me about letting him go, but I ignored him and kept dragging. I'm sorry, I told him as we went. I wouldn't trust you, and I'm sorry about that. You saved my life. Get my wife to freedom, he mumbled. My son. He was heavier than the door, but I knew I was strong enough. We rounded the bend with his boots dragging along the tunnel floor, slowing me down. Worse still was that Mueller's body was steadily becoming heavier. Both his arms had fallen into the dirt, and his head was slumped off to one side. I couldn't explain why. It just was. Gerda, set him down. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder and looked up to face him. I can't. He's hurt. Papa pressed between me and Officer Mueller, removing my arms and gently laying him on the ground. He's not hurting anymore. Oh. I backed against the dirt while my father felt for a pulse at the base of Mueller's neck. He turned to me and shook his head. I was wrong about him. That was all I could say, and it didn't seem like nearly enough. Papa took my hand. Let's go, Gerda. I started to protest, but we heard orders above ground for the men to be lowered into our tunnel. Wordlessly, I let my father lead me away. The officer who had dropped into the tunnel behind us ordered us to halt, but by that time we were too far away for his gun to be fired at the right angle. And then, suddenly, he stopped calling for us, and I knew why. Just ahead of us, in the dirt, Papa had stuck the striped flag of West Germany as a place marker. After 3 more steps, we passed beneath the Berlin Wall. We might not be out of the tunnel, but we were in the West. We were in the West. I could scarcely believe it. I felt like I was moving in a dream, and I hoped would never end. Only a few meters ahead, I saw the end of the tunnel. I first mistook the dim light for sunrise and then realized it was a nearby street light, a single star in a sea of darkness. I emerged from the tunnel in a small graveyard, blocked from the watchtower's view by the caretaker's shop, and from a hole disguised as a grave, I rose up to greet the coming morning. West German soldiers were here with their weapons drawn, making it clear that the Grenzers had missed their chance at us. They would not be allowed to step even a single toe into this half of the city. I filled my lungs with fresh air, too exhausted to even sit down. Papa squeezed my shoulder and then went over to talk to Frau Müller. I couldn't hear what they said, but I did see her tears as she cradled her baby close to her. Anna's parents went over to help comfort her. From there, my eyes drifted to the Berlin Wall, the side of it we had never seen before in the East. It was covered in graffiti and signs protesting its very existence. The side of it startled me, that people would dare to express themselves so boldly, so publicly. Beside me, Dominic leaned his elbow on my shoulder. "There's a lot more you'll have to get used to," he said. "I look forward to it," I mumbled, then jabbed him in the side. For the first time in 4 years, I'm able to tease him back. Papa hugged me, and then we all walked over to Fritz, who was being cared for by one of the West German officers. The smile on his face was so wide that nobody would have suspected the injury to his leg. "You did the impossible," Mama said, cradling each of our faces with her hands one at a time. I could only sit back and hope. "But you 3 children made it happen." I hugged Anna next. "I can't believe you came," I said to her. "You made me think about Peter, about what he would want us to do." Then her smile fell. "But I'm sorry about one thing. I promised you that I wouldn't tell anyone about the tunnel until tomorrow. I didn't even get halfway home before I knew I'd be breaking that promise with my parents." I only hugged her even tighter. "You can break those kinds of promises to me anytime you want." My father was there to hug me last of all. I had never seen him weep before, but now his tears flowed freely and he smiled through them. He held me back so he could look at me better and brushed his hand over my hair and crossed my shoulders. I knew how I must have looked, filthy, bone-tired, and even blood-stained, but he only gazed at me like he might look upon an angel. "My precious daughter," he said, "so brave, so bold. Officer Mueller's family. They are part of our family now." He looked at all of us and then back to me. "How should we celebrate our freedom?" I smiled back at him. "Maybe we could all sleep for a few hours," I said, "and then I thought we'd go to the market together to get something to eat." He chuckled. "And what might you want from the market?" "A banana." I'd been planning to ask for one since the first day of digging. He hugged me again. "You shall have one today." Only a few short hours later, I felt sunlight on my face. The sun never rises in the West, but that day it did. For me and for my family, the long, dark night was over. The end. Yeah!
That's possibly one of the best stories.
It was awesome, isn't it?
That's good on my
I love
favorite.
Miss Claire, I think we should watch a history video about the Berlin Wall.
Yeah, maybe I can find one on YouTube. I could post it.
Or I think there's such thing as videos of people that actually were able to escape in real life.
That was
Like,
kind
there's
of
one, I think, who rode a hot air balloon to get.
Miss Player,
Yeah.
were people able to escape?
Yes,
Were others-
yes, they were. Some were.
Yeah. Lots of people did.
It's sad that Mueller, well, pew, pew.
Mueller ended up sacrificing himself for them. Crazy.
yeah.
He pressed
We will see
T.
Wow.
him in
He
the
was the Grenzer.
Wait, is it just me or does Mueller sound like Mjolnir from Thor?
Maybe. So,
Who knows? Maybe he comes back as a hammer.
you guys have to think what on our wall, on our theme wall, what would the theme of the United be, you think?
Oh my gosh, you're at the classroom.
Yeah, you just
How
barely.
did I just?
Yeah, I
notice
just realized that when I got on.
Yeah.
I just barely realized.
I saw the chairs and then like the notes.
So you guys will have to let me know what you think the theme is. Maybe think about it this
The
afternoon.
theme has to be everything.
Yeah.
All of the above.
The theme is never stop trying.
Miss
Yeah.
Player.
Quit.
Or determination can help you.
Determination would be a good one.
Ooh, or sacrifice yourself for others.
Yeah,
Pinned
sacrifice.
one so far.
So tomorrow we'll start a new book. I grabbed a few books from our classroom